It was a quiet summer evening in Maplewood, a sleepy suburban town where nothing much ever happened, until he arrived. Jamal moved into the neighborhood with little fanfare, renting a modest townhouse at the corner of Elm Street. But within weeks, his presence became impossible to ignore. Tall, broad-shouldered, and effortlessly confident, Jamal carried himself with a charm that felt almost magnetic. His dark, soulful eyes seemed to hold secrets, and his smile, wide, warm, and slightly mischievous, had a way of disarming everyone he met. The town's young women noticed first. Among them was Sarah, a shy librarian who often watched him from behind the counter when he stopped by for books. He always returned her glances with a wink or a compliment that left her cheeks burning. Then there was Mia, a fiery bartender who liked to think she was immune to men's games, until Jamal showed up at her bar one night, tipping generously and staying late just to hear her talk. Chloe, a quiet artist who rented a studio nearby, swore she saw him looking at her paintings longer than anyone ever had. And it didn't stop there. A whole circle of friends and acquaintances, 10 young women in all, found themselves drawn to him, each feeling certain that she was the only one he truly noticed. Jamal seemed to know just what to say to each of them. To Sarah, he spoke of poetry and dreams of opening a bookstore. To Mia, he painted pictures of wild road trips and late-night dancing. To Chloe, he marveled at her art, saying her hands were made to create beauty. Each girl felt seen, special, loved. He had a way of appearing just when they needed someone. A flat tire fixed without asking. Coffee delivered at work just because. Texts in the middle of the night reminding them they were beautiful. His gestures were small but intimate enough to make hearts race. For weeks, each girl carried her private romance with him like a treasured secret. They didn't talk about him to each other, perhaps out of fear of jinxing it, perhaps because deep down they already sensed something was amiss. But cracks were beginning to show. One Saturday afternoon, Sarah caught sight of him walking in the park. She waved, then froze. Jamal wasn't alone. A girl she vaguely recognized from the gym was holding his arm, laughing up at him as though she'd known him forever. Sarah's stomach knotted, and she ducked behind a tree before he could see her watching. That night, as she lay awake, the image replayed in her mind, over and over. His easy smile, his hand resting on another girl's back. For the first time since meeting him, doubt crept in. But still, when her phone buzzed and his name appeared on the screen, her heart fluttered. She picked up anyway. The following weeks brought a flurry of romantic gestures from Jamal that seemed designed to erase Sarah's doubts. A bouquet of lilies appeared at her door with a note, "For my favorite smile." A quiet dinner at a rooftop bistro where he whispered about his future and how she fit into it. Each moment soothed her insecurities, even as something unsettled continued to gnaw at the edges of her heart. What Sarah didn't know was that elsewhere in town, Mia was having her own magical evening with him. At the bar where she worked, Jamal leaned against the counter, grinning as she poured him a drink. "When are you going to let me take you somewhere better than this?" he teased, his fingers brushing hers ever so lightly. Mia, bold and self-assured, found herself blushing like a schoolgirl. He had that effect on her, pulling back her layers of cynicism, making her believe in things she'd long dismissed. Chloe, meanwhile, sat cross-legged in her studio, reading a note he'd left tucked into her easel. "Your hands create beauty, but don't forget, they deserve to be held, too." It had been left alongside a small box of paints she'd mentioned needing weeks ago. Her pulse quickened just thinking about how attentive he always seemed, how he noticed things nobody else did. But even as Jamal's charm deepened his hold on each of them, inconsistencies began to surface. Sarah, while folding laundry one evening, noticed an unfamiliar gold bracelet tangled in her sheets. When she confronted Jamal playfully about it, he simply laughed, saying it must have slipped from a coworker who'd helped him carry boxes during his move. His easy smile left her embarrassed for even asking. Later, Mia tried calling him after her shift ended early one night, only to find his phone off. The next day, he claimed he'd fallen asleep watching a movie. She wanted to believe him, his kiss when he said it made her believe him. Chloe spotted him one rainy afternoon through the window of a cafe, his head bent close to another woman's as they laughed over coffee. When she caught his eye through the glass, he simply smiled, as though nothing was amiss, and she smiled back, though her stomach twisted. None of them spoke of these moments aloud. Each of them still clung to the idea that they were the only one. After all, hadn't he said it himself? That he'd never felt this way before? That they were different? And yet, the little cracks kept widening. Late one night, Sarah found herself scrolling through his social media, her chest tightening as she came across a photo. There he was, his arm draped around a girl she didn't recognize. The caption read simply, "My everything." For the first time, she didn't answer his call. The first to confront him was Mia. She stood on his doorstep one humid evening, clutching a small plastic stick in her hand, two faint pink lines staring back at her like a cruel promise. Her voice trembled when he opened the door. "Jamal, I'm pregnant," she said. For a fleeting second, his expression faltered, but then he grinned, pulling her into his arms. "That's incredible news, baby," he murmured. "We'll figure this out, you and me. I've never been more sure about anything." His words wrapped around her like silk, and for a moment, she allowed herself to believe them. But she wasn't the only one. Days later, Chloe too found herself sitting across from him at a quiet diner, her hands resting protectively over her stomach. "I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered. "I'm pregnant." Jamal reached across the table and squeezed her fingers. "This changes nothing," he assured her, his gaze steady. "You're everything I want." And still he kept the charade going. Sarah discovered her own pregnancy shortly after, and when she called him late at night in tears, his voice was calm, reassuring. "Don't worry, sweetheart," he said. "You're the only one. We'll get through this." But secrets have a way of colliding. It was Chloe who first began to suspect. At the doctor's office for her first appointment, she noticed Mia in the waiting room. Mia glanced up, startled, but Chloe forced a smile, pretending not to notice. Yet when she overheard Mia speaking to the nurse, mentioning Jamal's name, her blood ran cold. Chloe left the clinic without even seeing the doctor, her mind spinning. That night, she called Sarah. A tentative conversation turned into a cascade of confessions. Sarah was pregnant. Chloe was pregnant. Both by Jamal. The line fell silent before Sarah finally whispered, "I saw him with another girl just last week." The next morning, Chloe and Sarah tracked down Mia. Then another girl. Then another. One by one, they pieced together the pattern. 10 women in total, all with the same story. All with the same man. And all, shockingly, carrying his child. Fury replaced heartbreak as the truth became undeniable. Together, they devised a plan. On a crisp Sunday afternoon, the 10 of them stood outside his townhouse, each holding her own proof, pregnancy tests, ultrasound photos, crumpled love notes he'd written to his only one. When Jamal opened the door, he froze. His signature smile faltered, replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. One by one, the girls stepped forward, laying their evidence at his feet. "You told me I was the only one," Sarah said, her voice low and shaking. "You told all of us that," Mia added, her eyes blazing. Jamal had no words, only silence as the weight of his betrayal crashed down around him. Without another glance, the girls turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the doorway, alone and exposed. But their story wasn't over yet. The days that followed were quiet, but the silence was not empty. It was full of choice. For the first time in weeks, Sarah sat at her kitchen table without her phone in hand. She stared at the faint lines on her pregnancy test, then at the crumpled love notes she'd once cherished. With a deep breath, she gathered them into a box and shoved it to the back of her closet. She would not let his lies define her. Chloe found herself painting again. At first, her hands trembled when she picked up the brush, but slowly, color returned to her canvas, and to her life. The hurt was still there, but now it was something she could transform into something beautiful. Her next piece, she decided, would be titled Forgiven, but not forgotten. Mia, ever defiant, threw herself into work. She worked longer hours at the bar, saving money, making plans. She promised herself she would raise her child on her own terms, with or without him. One night, after closing, she whispered to her reflection, "We deserve better. And we'll have it." One by one, the other girls began to reach out to each other. What had started as heartbreak became a bond none of them could have predicted. They began meeting for coffee, sharing stories, trading advice. They laughed, even through tears. Together, they rebuilt what he had broken. As for Jamal, his townhouse grew quiet. The stream of flowers, texts, and charming smiles stopped. He no longer came by the bar. He no longer visited the library or the studio. People in town said he kept his head down now, avoiding the eyes of those he deceived. The sparkle that had once made him irresistible now seemed hollow, just a man trapped by his own web of lies. On a cool autumn morning, the 10 women met in the park. They sat in a circle beneath a tree, talking about everything and nothing. There were tears, of course, but also laughter and something else, resolve. Sarah looked around at the others, her heart full in a way she hadn't felt before. "We didn't deserve what he did," she said softly. "But we deserve what comes next." Chloe smiled. "We're more than what he made us feel." And Mia raised her coffee cup with a wry grin. "To us. To stronger hearts." The others echoed her, their voices steady. As they stood and walked together toward the sunrise, their silhouettes stretched long on the grass. Each step was a quiet victory. Each breath a promise, to themselves, to each other, to the lives growing inside them. They were no longer just the girls Jamal betrayed. They were women who had learned to love themselves again. And somewhere deep inside, they all knew this was only the beginning.